we know the depth of evil in our world. We look to the cross and we see your infinite love. We look to the cross and we feel your tender forgiveness. Help us to understand and to live your love in our lives each day. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. So, again, welcome everybody who's attending this meeting. You did receive at least 10 days ago an email, if you had signed up, that you were interested in this, with the financials to the end of December 2024, which is what your any comments or questions will be about. Before I turn it over to John, who is our accountant, I would like to just introduce and let you know who is on the Financial Advisory Council. Myself, Sue Brodrick, is the chair. I don't see Richard here, but Richard Betts is on the council. Cindy Christie Brooks is on the council. I see her here. Alan Buckingham is on council, and he's the liaison between the Financial Advisory Council and the Chinook Winds Regional Executive, as well as got some great assistance in helping with the council. Of course, John Den Hoed's on the council as our accountant, and Treena Duncan is on the council. So with having introduced those, I would like to turn the meeting over to John. And John, you can run with it how you see fit, and we can take questions as you go, or if you want them to wait till after you've done your little spiel, whatever works best for you.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, so I need to share my screen.
I'll make that possible.
Okay.
Here you go.
Now that should give you the balance sheet or the statement of financial position.
Yes, it's the statement of financial position.
All right. So big picture, we have 5.7 million in assets. 4.6, almost most of that is in investments. We have some cash and cash equivalents, and some receivables as well. And of course, the other big number there is due from related parties. These are primarily loans that have been loaned out to various communities of faith in the region, many of them going back as far as when the presbytery was in existence. On the liability side, we have some accounts payable and some monies due to those related parties. The breakdown in terms of the funds that we have 1.5 million in operating funds. However, $1 million of that is tied up in long-term receivables, as noted above. We have internally restricted funds of about 4 million and externally restricted funds of just over 300,000. Next picture we have here is the income compared to the budget last year. And we had a total of 2.9 million coming in during the year. 1.5 or 1.6 million of that is from the proceeds of the sale of the Renfrew United Church property. The assessments that we have, the $325,000 and the $180,000 through the denominational assessments, are in as expected. Regional assessments were higher than anticipated because there's some catching up each year. We do assess regionally, and sometimes you make targets, sometimes you don't. Depends on the congregation's ability to make the payments. So we're ahead on that one. And then we have administrative and support grants as well. So we're pretty much on target, a little bit higher than budgeted. And of course, you'll see there the property sale. Investment income is considerably higher than budgeted. The yield on our investments, which are being managed through Pacific Mountain region, was about 17.4% for 2024. Of that, 4 million, or sorry, there's about 300,000 of it that is unrealized. That is to say, we have earned it because the values have gone up, but we actually sell the instrument and you get the money in the bank. So depending on what's going on in the world today, I highly doubt we'll hit a 17% yield. For budget purposes for 2025, we have assumed a 5.5% yield on about $4 million of investment. What else we got here? We have grants to Campus United Calgary. This comes out of the mission support grants, about $80,000. We have about $32,000 in donations, pardon me. And then a general council office grant of $27,000 and a minor adjustment of $600. Expense-wise, the biggest ticket item is the salaries and contracts. And then we have grants. There's a schedule later on that you'll see as to where those went. Our program costs are $90,000. Professional fees close to budget. Meetings and conventions a little less than budgeted, which is okay. Consulting fees are lower than budgeted, so that's all okay as long as we're achieving what we want to set out. Administration is a bit higher than budgeted. The archives are pretty close on track. Travel expense is higher as we sort of come out of COVID, I guess, and start getting more active. And then expenses are lower than budgeted, and communications a fairly small amount. So the excess of our receipts or our expenses is about 1.6 million, and that's compared to the $200,000 or $300,000 deficit. But keep in mind that's because of the proceeds from the sale of the property and the investments yielding higher than we had anticipated.
But also we didn't spend the budgeted amount, just to be clear.
Right. Okay. This one is a complicated one in a way, but let me kind of walk through how to read this. What we do is we have the three funds that I mentioned earlier. So we start off here with the operating fund for the year. We have the income that we get. We have expenses that came out, and then we have a net operating fund. And then from the operating fund, we transfer out some monies. And by the end of the year, we have $1.5 million. I got to pull up another file here just for a sec. Just hold on here. Wrong statement. Yep. Okay. That's fine. Then on the internally restricted funds, these are funds that the executive has set aside for the various purposes identified. It shows what these funds received or what we allocated them, what expenses were incurred in terms of distributing some of those restricted funds, the net change, and then in some cases we've had to supplement them with funds from the operating fund to finance those and make sure that they have enough money to meet their obligations. And then you see the balance of the funds at the end of the year. We have a new fund here called the Renfrew Fund, which is $1 million that we took out of the 1.5 million and put it into internally restricted funds The purpose for these are yet to be determined by the executive, and it depends on what opportunities present us. And maybe Treena can comment on that a little further for now.
I don't know if Alan wants to speak to that on behalf of the
If she wants or
executive,
not.
but my understanding is that the executive is aware that the region is facing a bit of a financial sustainability challenge. And so the idea with the Renfrew Fund is to use it to support the operations of the region, rather than having it be a designated purpose, because we need to develop a longer range financial plan over the course of the next couple of years.
What Treena said.
Okay. We also, the next largest balance that we have going into 2025 is the Property and Church Development Fund, which are available to be utilized. Then we have the Indigenous Ministry Fund, and we also have another large one, which is the David Ferguson Music Bursary Fund. Those three were spun off a few years ago from the sale of the St. Matthew's property. And so we want to make sure we don't dip into the principal any more than we have to over time. We also have restricted funds. Externally restricted funds are monies that are given to Chinook Winds by various donors, and they identify what they want them to be used for. So that's why they're restricted, and they have to be used for that purpose unless we get the permission of the donor to change that. And so there's about $318,000. We had 322 at the beginning of the year, 318 at the back of the year. And so we managed to keep that fairly well intact. And of course, we do allocate some interest investment income to those funds where it's part of the structure. So in terms of going forward, we're looking at a, let me just pull up another little note here. For 2025, we're looking at about a $230,000 operating deficit. And that'll, if at that rate, in about 5 or 6 years, we'll have exhausted our resources there. We have a total deficit for next year budgeted at about $316,000. And the difference between the 316 and the 230,000, say, is because it's going to be drawing on restricted or unrestricted funds, which have a substantial balance. But it's the operating fund that we're concerned about, and making sure we have viability for longer than the next 5 years or so. So that'll be the interesting thing going forward. In terms of grants that were issued in 2025, this is the list of the grants that were issued. Most of them are as budgeted. A couple that needed some emergency funding, and that was Kasota West Camp, and also we had some monies from the David Ferguson Fund to help with various education music programs. The Lethbridge Youth Animator First Third Ministries budget had a program budget, or a grant budget of $9,000. However, with that youth ministry animator in Lethbridge flowing into the operations of Chinook, that is now part of their budget. So the funds have been used, but as part of their budget. This little list here identifies funds going to organizations that are functioning separate, although associated with Chinook Winds, but they are their own little entity. And so that's the number there. Yeah, so that's a quick walkthrough. So if you have any questions, by all means, and if you want me to go to a particular screen, let me know.
So are there any questions that anybody has? I'd like to just make a clarification, John. On
Yep.
your grants list, the Soda West for 5,040, that really
Mhm.
wasn't a grant. Wasn't that a restricted fund, externally restricted fund redirected by the donor? Because where it went to before, we as Chinook Winds Region weren't doing work in that avenue anymore.
I'd have to dig that out off the top
Yeah.
of my head.
I
don't-
think that's
That
what,
is right.
yeah, I think that's the 5,040 that went to Kasota West, the restricted, externally restricted, heritage, cemeteries is no longer, and the funds that were in there were redirected by the donor to Kasota West, but, it's still money that Kasota West wasn't budgeted for, but it did close out a restricted fund. So,
Right,
Mark,
yeah, so, yeah, so
Yeah.
it was still a grant
yes,
to them. That's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, there's still, I think there's about $318. If we go back to the funds here, there's a small amount, $313 in that Heritage Trust Fund that has yet to be transferred to them. It's just a residual balance that came out of the shuffle.
Yeah, exactly. And that can get transferred, and then that restricted fund, externally restricted
Yeah.
fund would go away. Mark,
You're right. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Could you please go back to the previous page?
This one?
Yeah, and somewhere's near the top. Scroll near the top, please. It showed there was a page that showed salaries and contractors.
oh, back one more page. On your statement of your income and investment
Right.
expenses. That one. Yep.
Yeah. This one here?
This one here, Mark?
It showed that the salaries and contractors were 10% over budget. Wasn't this one? This page was a
Yeah, no, because the budget was 602 and salaries and contractors was 664, which is 10% over. Yeah.
yeah. So what was the reason for that?
There's well, there would be a couple of things. We increased some salary categories that were not budgeted for. We added in the Lethbridge animator, which came from an external fund that wouldn't have been budgeted at the beginning of that year. And I think added in a little bit of additional contract work here and there that was an unbudgeted expense.
Thank you.
Plus something to note, when we do the budget work, in October, we try to do it, or, we don't always have the full guidelines from the national office on the salaries. We have, a rough guesstimate, and, sometimes we're, our budget is a little low. Otherwise, we're usually fairly accurate, but when we do the budget, and I think that you'll all notice this happens in your own churches, when you're doing your budget, you don't always have your national information yet either. And so depending on when you present your budget, but, yeah, 10% on a budget with, the moving targets, I think is pretty good, actually. Any other questions to any of the, 4 schedules that John has shared with us? So I think one thing we need to, and John spoke about it, and we need to keep in our mind that we definitely came out of 2024 much better than we projected because of the sale of the Renfrew property and the investment income. But without those, we would have been definitely down in where we had budgeted for. And we are not sustainable at this rate without some long-term planning. And so the Renfrew money being restricted, the $1 million, if we can keep that whole, the income that will come on that will help with operating, but yeah, we need to just be very cognizant of our spending in the region because of our income, you know, and how to be self-sustaining. And financial advisory has been having some good discussions on how to plan out 5 years, and these conversations will have to continue. So that's what financial advisory's been looking at.
John, maybe you could stop sharing your screen.
Sure.
Any other questions about the finances or concerns? Okay. Well, if there's no further questions or concerns, you now have received the current year-end financials. They are draft because they're still being reviewed. But you that are here and those that registered for this will have the current 2024 statements, and hopefully will give you comfort that the finances of our region are being well cared for and maintained. Thank you to John Den Hoed for all the hours he puts in to keep us up to date, and to Treena and the executive for trying to be cognizant of how we spend our money. That's not in the budget. So, and to all those others that, you know, do the work of our region with good due diligence.
We're anticipating a slightly different picture next year, given the state of the markets, so.
Yes.
Yeah, keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, 2 years ago, if I remember rightly, I think it was 2022 that we had a net loss in our investments rather than a net gain. And so if you all know what's happening to yours, hopefully we don't look at investments by month. You look at it for the year, and the first quarter isn't very promising, but hopefully we've got 3 quarters to go that can maybe turn it around. But as I say, in the world that we're living in right now, no one knows. So if there's no further questions, then I would adjourn this meeting and see you all in Lacombe.
And thank you, Sue, for your work and for the leadership that you offer through the Finance Advisory Council and all the Finance Advisory members. And I'd like to echo your thoughts to John. John works very hard on our behalf, and really appreciate the leadership that you offer, John, so as well as the support you give me. So thank you so much, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Good day, everyone.
Yep, take care.
Bye-bye.